You know what I mean? I want to be looked at as an amazing performer.
Aaliyah smiled during an interview, a fleeting moment that seemed like a passing joke, yet it perfectly captured the way she moved through the world, graceful, reserved, and always choosing to hold on to the light, even when surrounded by darkness. She was the embodiment of softness, but the world around her was far from gentle. Behind that effortless smile were wounds no one could see. Unbalanced relationships, suffocating expectations, scathing rap lyrics, and hands that once held her only to let go without warning. Aaliyah never named names, but if, just once, she could speak out, these might be the 7 names she quietly distanced herself from. Not out of envy, not out of personal resentment, but because they were the ones who helped her see more clearly the darker side of a world she gave her youth to. So, are you ready to enter that list? Familiar names? Yes. But the stories behind them will keep your eyes locked on the screen. R. Kelly, when an early start also meant early hurt. In 1994, Aaliyah had just turned 15, an age meant for school friendships and dreams. But for her, it was the moment she found herself inside a professional recording studio preparing to release her debut album. The producer, none other than R. Kelly, then 27 years old, a major star and also a protege of her uncle Barry Hankerson. The way their encounter unfolded, tangled in power music and family ties, marked a turning point, but not in the way Aaliyah or anyone else had hoped for. The album Age Ain't Nothing But a Number was a resounding success, selling over 1 million copies and propelling Aaliyah's name into the spotlight. But that title, Age Ain't Nothing But a Number, would later send chills down people's spines when the truth about her relationship with R. Kelly came to light. A marriage certificate surfaced. R. Kelly and Aaliyah had secretly wed in August 1994, with her age falsified as 18. She was only 15. Aaliyah's family took immediate action. The marriage was annulled. All ties between her and R. Kelly were cut. Aaliyah left the record label, reclaimed control of her image, and embarked on a new path. But the damage, if there was any, did not simply fade. She almost never spoke of the past. Her representative once shared, she didn't talk about him, and no one was allowed to ask. In a rare conversation with boyfriend Damon Dash years later, she said just one sentence: "That man was a bad guy." What strikes me here isn't only R. Kelly's actions, but the way Aaliyah chose to respond. She didn't publicly condemn him. She didn't write a diss track. But perhaps what she didn't say was how she preserved her strongest self. Silence sometimes isn't weakness. It's a refusal to dignify what doesn't deserve to be remembered. From that point forward, it became clear how Aaliyah rebuilt her career. She was cautious with the media, avoided emotionally risky environments, and only worked with people who made her feel safe. Some say that carefulness was the legacy of an early trauma, but others saw it as extraordinary maturity. A girl who understood far too early that showbiz isn't just lights and applause, but a minefield hidden beneath the guise of mentorship. Aaliyah's case, when viewed from a social perspective, raises important questions about the role of adults in the music industry. Who is responsible for protecting young talent? Who dares to speak out while things are still murky? And why must some stories wait decades to be heard? Perhaps that's why when R. Kelly's legal scandals resurfaced recently, Aaliyah's name came up again, as one of the earliest victims, but also the first to walk away and never look back. But if her first fall came at the hands of someone she trusted, then we have to wonder, were the relationships that came afterward, even the harmless ones, ever safe enough for her to truly trust again? Jay-Z, when the one who couldn't have her sided with the one who hurt her. He wasn't the first man Aaliyah dated, nor was he the last one who tried to win her over. But he was one of the rare few who came close, only to lose everything. Not just because their love didn't work out, but because of a decision he made later, one many found unforgivable. Sean Carter, better known as Jay-Z, was by the late 1990s one of the most successful and powerful rappers on the East Coast. At the time, Aaliyah was riding high on the success of her One in a Million album, while Jay-Z had just made waves with Volume 2, Hard Knock Life. Two young stars at the height of their careers crossed paths through industry connections and music events, and gradually grew close. According to those close to them, Jay-Z was drawn to Aaliyah's intelligence, maturity, and the way she carried herself with dignity in a world full of temptation. They spent time getting to know each other, quietly, never making it public. Yet that very discretion was a sign that Aaliyah never felt fully safe. People close to her revealed that while Jay-Z made his interest clear, Aaliyah never fully opened up to him. She felt he was too controlling, somewhat possessive, and had a tendency to turn the women around him into satellites revolving around his world, something completely opposite to the independence Aaliyah valued deeply. Eventually, she quietly stepped away and began dating Damon Dash, Jay-Z's best friend and co-founder of Rockefeller Records. The story then shifted from romance to quiet rivalry. Damon and Aaliyah quickly became a well-known couple. They were serious, planning an engagement, and widely seen in the music world as a clean couple, romantic without being flashy. That was also when the distance between Jay-Z and Damon began to grow. No one publicly said Aaliyah was the reason, but industry insiders knew that when your brother wins the heart of the woman you once longed for, it cuts deeper than just a personal loss. It wounds pride, especially for a man as proud as Jay-Z. But it didn't end there. In August 2001, Aaliyah died in a tragic plane crash in the Bahamas. Damon Dash was devastated. The music world mourned. And just months later, Jay-Z shocked many by partnering with R. Kelly on a joint album titled The Best of Both Worlds. This was the man who had hurt Aaliyah the most, whose name she avoided for the rest of her life. Even if it was just business in the eyes of Damon Dash, and likely anyone who truly loved Aaliyah, that move felt like a betrayal. Damon said he couldn't understand how Jay-Z could choose to work with someone like that, especially so soon after Aaliyah's death. He refused to promote the album, skipped press events, and from that point on cut ties with Jay-Z, not just as a friend, but also as a business partner. In a rare interview on the matter, Damon said everyone knew what happened with Aaliyah and R. Kelly. And Jay still worked with that guy. I couldn't be around someone like that anymore. If Aaliyah had lived to see it, what would she have thought? Most likely she would have remained silent just as she always did. But that silence would have spoken volumes, a clear, definitive boundary. She had already chosen not to love Jay-Z because she couldn't trust him. And now his decision to align with R. Kelly would have confirmed that she was right all along. And so the man who once longed to enter her heart ultimately stood with the one who hurt her most. That is why Jay-Z's name belongs on this list, not because of any public feud, but because of the cold decision he made once Aaliyah was no longer around to speak for herself. If love was once a chance he let slip away, then trust, something far more valuable, is something he could never reclaim. And when everything fell apart, who was left standing beside Aaliyah? Not for gain, not for fame, but simply because they understood her pain from within. Sean Diddy Combs, When Bright Lights Make You Feel Small. Amid the early crossroads of Aaliyah's career, her brief collaboration with Sean Diddy Combs could be seen as a short pause, not long enough to spark conflict, but enough to stir a sense of imbalance. It was 1996, and Diddy was at the height of his influence, shaping the sound and image of a hip-hop generation, through stars like the notorious B.I.G. Faith Evans and Mace, not just through music, but through a bold, extravagant lifestyle. Meanwhile, 17-year-old Aaliyah was on a quiet mission to reclaim her voice after the emotional scars left by her relationship with R. Kelly. They met at a moment of mutual need. She was searching for new direction, and he had the platform to launch it. She flew to Trinidad for a trial recording session. But from the very start, the bad boy environment left her feeling out of place. It wasn't about a lack of talent. Diddy clearly knew how to make hits. But rather, the atmosphere around the studio, non-stop parties, interrupted conversations, watchful eyes, and a loudness that made it hard for her to find stillness. Recording sessions were punctuated by strong liquor and loud laughter. What might be normal for bad boy artists made Aaliyah feel disconnected. Maybe she didn't feel safe, or maybe she just didn't feel seen. She left. No announcement, no noise. The stated reason was a move to Atlanta to work with Jermaine Dupri. But if you look at Aaliyah's career history, it's easy to see she always maintained distance from chaos, and this quiet exit carried the same message. What's notable here is that no one was wrong in this story. Diddy, as a producer, had his style. Aaliyah, as an artist reshaping herself, had her instincts. She may have sensed that becoming a seductive bad girl, an image often associated with Diddy's female artists, didn't align with her path. And if it only took a few days to realize that walking away early was a form of clarity. Diddy would later speak of Aaliyah with respect. He called her someone who dared to be different, high praise, especially for someone who had walked away. And though no songs came out of their collaboration, the brief encounter left behind a lesson many young artists could relate to the music industry. Isn't just where you showcase talent, it's also where you learn to protect your own safe space. Did Aaliyah hate Diddy? Probably not. But she may have disliked how that environment made her feel out of place. And that alone was enough to make her take a different path. So in a world full of opportunity, but also hidden expectations, how do you know what space is truly right for you, and when it's time to leave? Perhaps that's a question she had already answered for herself, long before most ever thought to ask. Eminem, one rap line, one boundary, one very Aaliyah response. Some wounds come from those close to us, but others, the unexpected kind, come from people we've never even met. For Aaliyah, Eminem likely belonged to the second category. They never collaborated, had no personal relationship, not even any public exchange. Yet one rap line was enough to create a moment she would not easily forget. At the end of 1999, while Aaliyah was deeply focused on filming Romeo Must Die and working on her third studio album, Eminem released a freestyle titled Get You Mad. The track, true to Slim Shady's style, was filled with mockery, shock value, and jabs at celebrities and the media. But among the barrage of names and lines, one stood out and caused a pause. Brandy and Monica walked in, caught me fing Aaliyah. To rap fans, this might have seemed like just another filthy punchline, a bold, irreverent wordplay typical of Eminem. But for a young artist like Aaliyah, who had always carefully crafted a graceful and elegant public image, the line wasn't just a crude joke. She didn't respond publicly, didn't speak to the press, and didn't start a backlash campaign. But according to a member of Missy Elliott's team, Aaliyah personally approached Eminem at a music industry party in New York in 2000, an event celebrating the Marshall Mathers LP's success. No one knows exactly what was said. Some claimed she simply asked why, others said she spoke in a calm but clear tone, explaining she felt disrespected. There was never a public apology, but after that encounter, Eminem never mentioned Aaliyah in a rap again. That silence this time on his part could be seen as a quiet acknowledgement that he had crossed a line. From my perspective, what made Aaliyah's response so remarkable was the way she didn't demand respect through noise. She didn't lower herself to clap back. She simply made it clear face to face that she was not someone to be toyed with. And that was enough to shift the behavior of an artist known for sparing no one. In a culture where diss raps are a common artistic language, Aaliyah's firm quiet stand became its own powerful statement, not meant to strike back, but to remind others there are boundaries. However, it's also worth considering Eminem's side. He created the Slim Shady persona as a chaotic, lawless alter ego. Did he mean to insult Aaliyah specifically, or did he merely see her name as a convenient rhyme? Perhaps the lack of intention made Aaliyah's calm but decisive reaction all the more impactful. And maybe this wasn't really a story about absolute right or wrong, but about how we each define our value and how we expect others to recognize it. In a world where every name can be turned into a punchline, is a silent but unwavering stance like Aaliyah's still strong enough to protect one's dignity? Timberland, when brotherhood brushes against the edge of self-respect. Some relationships don't need labels. Aaliyah once called Timberland her big brother, her musical sibling, the one who helped her create a signature sound at a time when R&B was becoming saturated. They clicked not only in the studio, but also in the safety. He gave her a space where she could be fully herself, without fear of being controlled or used. But sometimes it's the closest bonds that are most vulnerable, not due to betrayal, but because of the quiet gap between career and emotion. After the release of One in a Million, 1996, Aaliyah became a defining figure of a new R&B era. Much of that success was tied to Timberland, who brought her a futuristic, daring sound far from the soft traditional R&B style. Together with Missy Elliott, they formed a golden triangle of innovation in music production. They didn't just make music, they set trends. But by 2000, when Aaliyah began working on what would be her third and final album, Timberland was largely absent from the process. Fans wondered, was Aaliyah looking for change, seeking a new direction? The truth was more delicate. According to multiple sources, a financial disagreement had arisen between Timberland and Blackground Records. The label Aaliyah was signed to disputes over compensation and production rights. Some said Timberland felt undervalued. Others believed he was being edged out as Aaliyah's new team brought in younger producers. Whatever the cause, the result was clear. Timberland was nearly absent in the early phases of the Aaliyah 2001 album. And for someone as emotionally attuned as Aaliyah, this wasn't just a contractual issue, it was a personal one. For months, she and Timberland had no contact. There was no drama, but a heavy silence, the kind that only exists between people who once shared deep trust. Eventually, Aaliyah broke the silence. One phone call unannounced without blame. She simply said the album needed him, and if they still considered each other family, then music should be what reconnects, what money never could. Timberland flew out immediately. They had only a few weeks left before the album was finalized, and in that time, he contributed to two of its most iconic tracks, We Need a Resolution and More Than a Woman. These hits didn't just define Aaliyah's sound, they proved something deeper. Sometimes old bonds need just one brave heart to hold them together. Years later, Timberland admitted he had once harbored feelings for Aaliyah. In a 2011 interview, he said, "I loved her, but not in a romantic way. It was love like, you know you can't have her." Perhaps in that temporary distance, Aaliyah sensed something more complex than business, an emotional undertow she wasn't ready to name. From the outside, it looked like a minor rift in a working relationship. But for Aaliyah, everything had depth. She didn't see people as just producers or colleagues. She saw them as people, as friends. And when that friend chose silence for whatever reason it hurt, no one wants to be forgotten when they need to be trusted most. Still, Aaliyah didn't hold a grudge. She took the first step to reconnect. And perhaps in doing so, she salvaged part of Timberland's conscience. He never forgot the time they were apart. He never hid his regret when speaking about Aaliyah in later years. His voice always softened when he mentioned her. Because more than anyone he knew, he had almost lost something precious. Not just music, but a rare friendship in a world full of agendas. On a broader level, the relationship between Aaliyah and Timberland raises a profound question. When does talent collide with pride? In an entertainment world where the line between art and business is as thin as paper, artists like Aaliyah often have to choose between loyalty and creativity, between feelings and results. What made her stand out was that when she felt hurt, she didn't cut people off. She tried to repair what could still be saved. Not everyone has the courage to do that. But Aaliyah did, and she did it quietly. Sadly, they didn't have long together after reuniting. Aaliyah was released in July 2001. A month later, she was gone forever. And all that's left is the bittersweet comfort that yes, they were once separated. But thankfully, that wasn't how their story ended. Ginuwine. When friendship goes so quiet, there's no way back in the memories of those who lived fully through late 90s. Music Aaliyah, Timberland, Missy Elliott, Ginuwine, Playa, Magoo were once a family. Not the kind of flashy crew boasting stage dominance, but a group of young, passionate artists who gathered under the roof of Blackground and Swing Mob Studios in search of a unique path. There were no gimmicks between them, only music, long nights, trust, and the shared sense that they were creating something that could change a generation. Within that group, Ginuwine, born Elgin Lumpkin, was like a big brother, a close friend to Aaliyah. They toured together, recorded music, and shared their first moments performing before the public with their own voices. But like many artistic friendships, not everything kept its original form. By 1999, tensions began to rise within the Blackground camp. Ginuwine, now riding high on the success of his hit, Pony began clashing with management, specifically Barry Hankerson, Aaliyah's uncle and longtime manager. He felt he wasn't receiving fair compensation, and after months of back and forth, he decided to leave. For Ginuwine, it was a career decision. But to Aaliyah, who placed deep loyalty in what she called family, the move may have felt like something else entirely. There was no argument, no scandal. Just a prolonged silence between two people who once called each other friends. The phone calls faded, the encounters grew awkward. those around them noticed something had shifted. According to Ginuwine, Aaliyah was very upset by his departure, and that sadness kept her from wanting to talk to him again. He tried reaching out, but every door seemed closed, not out of anger, but likely disappointment. After Aaliyah's passing, Ginuwine shared in a television interview that he wished he had another chance to explain, or at least to say, sorry. "I don't think she stayed mad at me forever," he said, "but we never got the time to really understand each other again." Their friendship stands as proof that even the closest bonds can fracture over choices that seem personal. But in the world of art, where family isn't just blood, but shared stages and long nights walking away, even for valid reasons, can leave someone feeling left behind. Aaliyah may not have hated Ginuwine in any harsh sense, but her decision to remain silent, not to reconcile, was its own way of saying, "I'm hurt, and I don't know how to heal from this." Their story ended unfinished. Yet in that silence, we might understand some relationships don't need a dramatic conclusion, just one moment of understanding that sadly came too late. Jermaine Dupri, when differences couldn't sustain a shared dream. Compared to the other names mentioned, Jermaine Dupri didn't directly cause Aaliyah pain. There was no personal conflict, no failed romance, no public fallout. But in another sense, a quiet form of hurt that comes from unmet expectations, from two people trying to build something together, only to realize they didn't share the same dream. Jermaine perhaps still deserves a place on this list. In 1996, Aaliyah was at a pivotal point. After her debut album tied to R. Kelly, a milestone of success. But mired in scandal, she needed a new direction, a sound that could redefine her image. Jermaine Dupri was at the time one of the hottest young producers in America, having made his mark with Xscape Criss Cross and especially TLC. Her decision to travel to Atlanta and work with Jermaine was completely logical to search for a fresh sound and collaborate with a hitmaker holding the formula for success. But not every talent is compatible. In a later interview, Jermaine recalled that they recorded a few tracks, but everything came to a halt quickly. In his words, Aaliyah was someone unafraid to go left. She didn't want to sound like anyone else. She was chasing something nobody had done yet. Meanwhile, Jermaine's style at the time, rooted in familiar rhythms and easygoing slow jams, wasn't daring enough and unintentionally created a creative gap between them. It didn't offer Aaliyah the sense of pushing boundaries she was seeking. They didn't clash, they simply weren't on the same wavelength. There's also the theory that Aaliyah's decision to pivot toward Timberland and Missy Elliott, then relatively new names, was a deliberate artistic statement. Not because she didn't respect Jermaine, but because she recognized that staying might produce music that was easily accepted but not truly groundbreaking. And as history shows, Aaliyah never chose the safe path. From Jermaine's perspective, there may have been a tinge of disappointment. A young artist he invested time and hopes in left before anything could take shape. But to his credit, he never turned that disappointment into bitterness. Years after Aaliyah's passing, Jermaine still spoke of her with admiration. She had an eye that very few artists have. She knew exactly what she wanted, and she never settled for anything less. Perhaps Aaliyah never disliked Jermaine Dupri. But if dislike can mean the discomfort of being boxed into creative limits that didn't belong to her, then this collaboration was something she needed to walk away from. Aaliyah was deeply sensitive to labels. She could tell who was trying to mold her into the ideal R&B female singer and who allowed her the freedom to experiment. In a world where female artists are often shaped by men's ideas, Aaliyah chose to step back early before things unraveled. This final chapter doesn't carry anger or loss, but serves as a reminder sometimes walking away at the right moment is an act of love for yourself and for the other person. Jermaine wasn't someone who hurt Aaliyah, but the creative disconnect between them remains a clear example of how she protected her artistic identity. No compromises, no bargaining, no repeats. If you're into real stories and deep perspectives on the world of entertainment, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Every week we'll bring you compelling, unexpected content that you won't easily find anywhere else. Thanks for being with us, and see you in the next video.
All data, analysis, and commentary in this video are presented based on information available at the time of production. The content is subject to change over time and should not be considered a definitive forecast. There is still so much more to explore: stories of resilience, legacy, and truth. Feel free to dive into some of our top recommended videos now appearing on your screen.